Hi, I'm Jenny Walterman, and this is my EDL 854 Module 1 intro video. A little bit about me. I am married and have 5 kids. We're a blended family. I have 2 granddaughters and 1 grandchild on the way. We don't know if it's a boy or a girl yet. I'm a musician and an introvert, and I enjoy gardening, reading, kayaking, bird watching with my husband, playing in our band, and fishing. Professionally, I was a private music teacher for the first 20 years of my professional career. While doing that, I also had an avocation of working in corporate accounting and doing various types of auditing and accounting functions for different corporations. After teaching violin for that many years, I then transitioned to teaching business in the high school in 2016, and I've been doing that since then. And throughout that experience, I've realized I've become very drawn to CTE programming and really helping students with their post graduation plans, whether that's higher level education, military, or going directly into the workforce. And so I became very passionate about helping every student that walks across that stage at graduation feel good about what's coming next for them, and sometimes just even helping students get across that stage, get to that point. So over the past few years, I developed an internship program at our school and also facilitated some job shadowing experiences for students. And so I will be transitioning out of the classroom and into a job with our district in the student services office. And I will be the new director of IPS and real world learning for 6th through 12th grade. In this assignment, we will be discussing some recurring themes that were observed during the assigned readings, and the themes that were given in the assignment instructions include school level governance, student and adult success and well being, data informed decisions, equitable resource plans, finance, laws, policies, and regulations, and other themes that I have observed. First up is school level governance. And this is supposed to be a 4 to 5 minute video. And so, as such, I'm going to highlight the main themes that I observed. And there are detailed explanations and citations within my slides, but I probably won't touch on every single one in order to get through this in the time requirement. So, for school level governance, throughout the readings, I observed that a lot of times they were mentioning that the principals really know best. They know best what their students need, what's the best resources that the school could have in order to meet needs of their students and staff. And also, another theme was to spread out decision making in the district, and so that it's not a centralized budget decision by one or a few managers, but to decentralize that and hand it out to various managers at different levels to meet more of the needs based on the knowledge of people that have firsthand knowledge of what's going on. Also, to know that empowered principals design better programs. So if you give principals the ability to make change and make decisions financially, it will facilitate change and empower them, and which also by default will empower teachers and incentivize staff and be a real game changer for student unique needs and meeting the needs of all students. And then principal budget management versus district level was an item that was discussed about whether or not your central office is handling all the budget balancing, or if the principal should be managing their own building budget. And then financial management training for principals that may not know how to handle the finances, and so therefore either aren't handling them at all or not handling them well. And so training principals on how to better assess what their fiduciary responsibilities and status is would be beneficial. Next up is student and adult success and well being. For this, I observed that a lot of the different articles were saying local budget management increases student achievement. So when you give school level budget decisions autonomy to make implementation decisions, it makes way for high quality teaching and learning and allows for school improvement that can exponentially improve student achievement. Another so there's several other examples of quotes from different resources regarding that topic. And then classroom size and teacher student ratios impact achievement. So in several different readings, I noticed that they were mentioning about class size and how funding and principal determination of what the needs are can affect a student to teacher ratio and class size, which by default also impacts student achievement and education outcomes. And then increased spending per student increases post-secondary success. So there were several places where they were talking about if we increase the spending per student, it's going to dramatically increase their potential success. Not only for completing high school, but also what comes after high school. So I just pulled out a statistic that I saw in Patterson's article, which said that 20% increase per student results in 25% higher earning after high school. And that was a 20% increase per student. And then increased critical resources can improve outcomes for poor and minority students. So I don't think that that's a secret to anybody that increased funding for our lower economical schools will help benefit students. And then data informed decisions is the next theme that we were asked to focus on. And my key points that I pulled out there was that data driven decisions improve student achievement, and that data can help prove per pupil spending impacts attainment gap. So, what I meant by that was, and I threw some statistical data in there for you, is that 21.7% increase in per pupil spending for K through 12 children from low income families is significant enough to eliminate the education attainment gap. And that was by Barrett. And this topic I observed in several different articles, but it was talking about per pupil spending a lot of the time, and that if we are basing our federal funding on how much money the district gets per enrolled student, if we increase that funding amount per student, it will help bridge the gap between students that are struggling and students that are in a lower economic situation. I also thought it was interesting that they said that increasing student spending by 10% will increase the probability of graduation by 7% overall and 10% for non-poor children. The next theme that I saw was that principals must know their data to effectively advocate financially. And this was a biggie that principals, I touched on it earlier, that principals really need to know and understand what's happening in their building. They need to know and understand their financials and how to run a budget, but they also need to know how to assess their data and pull out from it what story is being told about their building and their students and their staff, and be able to use that information to effectively advocate financially for their building, for their staff, and for their students. Equitable resource plans. There were a couple of different plans that I observed. The centralized versus decentralized budgeting models, where we focus in on who is establishing the budgeting and running the financials. Is it a centralized decision by a few people at the district head office, or are you farming that out and allowing a decentralized budgeting model where building leaders are empowered to make decisions? And then a student-centered funding seemed to be another resource plan where school funding systems, schools receive money based on student enrollment. And I mentioned that in a previous slide. It was a reoccurring theme about per student funding, and federal funding also affects ELA and students from high poverty schools. So it includes school leaders in getting more control over their own budget. And then equitable budgeting. A lot of talk about equity in budgeting and how that can impact change and impact accountability, which that accountability piece there really helps to ensure that goals are being met that are set by the district, and that the input is being received from various sources so that it's equitable and fair for impacting all of the stakeholders in a building, and hopefully bridges the gap and has a better um, outcome for students that maybe would have gotten lost otherwise. Finance laws, policies, regulations. This was kind of a hodgepodge that I put together. I noticed in some of the articles they were referencing different federal programs. So up here at the top, the ESSA, ARP, and SSFR. ESSA is Every Student Succeeds Act, which provides accountability plans, which require goal setting systems of accountability, school interventions, testing, and is a transition from No Child Left Behind Act. American Rescue Plan, that ARP, is the largest federal investment in public education that we have ever seen and probably will ever see. It was a one-time funding that was created to help school programming and help recover from COVID shutdown challenges, both socially, emotionally, and academically. Um, Budget cuts to school programming, such as Title II and funding for school vouchers, are part of the ESSA that impacts district budgeting. And I didn't realize how all of those fit together until I read Patterson's article. So I thought that was really interesting. And then SSFR assessment and data results will inform federal, state, and local policymakers' decisions about policies affecting equity. School funding comes from various sources, was a conglomerate of a lot of observations throughout the articles where we see that states provide most of the funding for schools. Federal is less than 10%. Federal funding is for specific programming, and state funding comes from state taxes and fees, local property taxes, and municipal type of programs. Oh, I also thought it was really interesting that the State Board of Education has salary policies that principals should review to ensure teacher salaries are in line with the level set by the Department of Education. I didn't realize that. I didn't know that. So, some other themes that I observed would be that effective programming requires equity, transparency, and flexibility. We saw these words over and over again about programming being equitable. And in order to be truly effective, there needs to be a level of transparency and flexibility in order to meet the needs of students and allow for input and responsiveness from between building leaders and school board members. Also, the one size fits all mass planning implementation type of mentality should really be avoided at all costs, and it's not effective and it doesn't truly meet the needs of students, and it needs to be changed. And then letting principals participate and engage in the decision making process regarding budgets was a biggie that I saw over and over again. School-based management versus site-based management of resources. So that's going back to that centralized versus decentralized theme. And then funds needing to be accompanied by transparency and accountability. So going back to that equitable, transparent point at the top, but this one also is being more specific to when funds are awarded to a district, that there needs to be transparency and accountability about how funds are being spent, which was initiated by the ARP plan with the post-COVID funding. And then school choice, I noticed popped up every once in a while about our funding, public versus private versus charter, school charter vouchers, and allowing students to and families to choose where they want to go, and how does that impact funding and district decision making. And so I pulled out this quote from Barrett, which stated, while funding alone cannot provide improved learning outcomes, it provides an underlying condition that makes them possible. And I think overall, this was the overall theme that I wanted to pull out, that we were talking a lot about funding and about buildings, but ultimately it all comes down to the student success. And we know that better funding improves learning and improves outcomes. So, my reflection, what I learned that I didn't know before, there were two things that jumped out at me. I didn't really know or understand ESSA and how funding or budget cuts affect school programming. I also didn't realize that the State Board of Education has a salary guidelines. I just thought that each district determines their own pay scale budget. So that was something new I learned. And then how will this information influence decisions I make as a future school leader? And I think the key thing that jumped out at me was just data, data, data. It's important to know and study my school data in order to help teachers and students academically, but it's also vital to know my building data in order to adequately advocate for the needs in my building. And then concerns about being in charge of school budgets as a future building leader. So I think my biggest concern is that I don't know what I don't know, right? Like, in trying to ask the right questions and get to the vital information when I maybe don't have all the puzzle pieces or I don't understand all the puzzle pieces. And just trying to get the vital information that will help me manage a building budget equitably and responsibly. And then these are my references. And I think, did I show both pages? Well, it says page one, page two, but it's actually page two. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for watching. I'm sure I went over the time limit and I'm sure somebody will comment on it, but that was a lot of material to cover in 4 to 5 minutes. Anyway, I look forward to seeing all of you and commenting and having engaging discussions in the Currents community.